So I wanted to talk a little bit about the dopamine loop and how it's connected to equanimity and achieving a balanced mind. So most people think of the dopamine and dopamine seeking things as, partying, porn, drugs, the very, very obvious ones. However, they are typically much deeper. And the more that you cut out, the more you see within yourself that it's deeply, deeply ingrained within us. And these are not bad or evil. However, they do create certain attachments, clinging, aversion. And so everyone has their own, from our own life experiences. However, you have to go within your own mind to figure out what those things are. It's important to me because my background with mental health issues, being in fight or flight, when one is in fight or flight constantly, and in their consciousness is rooted in that, they are more prone to the urges that quickly come up, and then they basically are, you're using the quick release the quick dopamine release as easing the tension of how your current mind feels. And also I noticed, I've also read about this, but basically lower income communities are more susceptible to that sort of, you're in the fight or flight and you need the easing of that. So you go towards the quickest thing that eases your mind, which is typically high dopamine seeking things, drugs, alcohol, partying, porn, all those sorts of just unhealthy habits. And so it is like a cycle. So for me, I was, in that loop on an unconscious level. And for example, this is just one example, and I remember it was about 3 years ago. I used to notice that this is a very small example, but I think it's important because it just shows how subtle these things are. So about 3 years ago, I remember I used to, before work, I would go to work and I would consume, like, maybe one day a week, a coffee with a lot of sugar in it, some sort of a latte with sugar and all these sorts of things. Starting your morning out with that alone is kind of saying fuck it for the rest of the day. You're getting a big old, 200 milligram coffee with 40 grams of sugar. It's kind of, it's a big dopamine spike. I started noticing that on those days I would do that, my screen time was more, I would eat more, I would have much more of like a day that was like this. And I started just realizing this is simply because I'm spiking all those things in the morning. My mind's fireworks are going off in my mind from the start. And that's creating a day of compulsive behaviors of just this. Needing to feel better, needing to feel better, needing to feel better. And it's an endless chase. That's just on a daily basis from something small like a sugary coffee. It can get really, really micro the more you go into it. But I think just the more you go into that sort of thing, the more you realize how deep it is. And a lot of it is just like behavior patterns. And I'm interested in behavior patterns because of my past, and so I think it's different for everyone, but certain backgrounds of people have this more ingrained in them than others. So having that flight or fight activity constantly contributes to an overactive mind. So when the mind is overactive, overstimulated, there's less emotional regulation, which leads to more impulsive and compulsive decision making. And as the process, that cycle of feeling uncomfortable, you're stuck in flight or flight, you're making these impulsive, compulsive decisions, you're always, rushing through tasks, rushing through thoughts, rushing through life itself, and not really, sitting still. And then these unconscious decisions, which are dopamine triggering, they're leading to up, down, which is just an endless chase. I also know that this firsthand from, struggling with OCD, and it works in a very similar way. So the body feels uncomfortable, anxious, and the mind basically finds a behavior, some sort of tick that gives it, some temporary relief. The relief is like basically a dopamine burst, and over time it just becomes automatic. The obsession triggers the compulsion, almost unconsciously. It's really just another version of like the same kind of dopamine loop. And also another thing is we are also in this dopamine deficit state as a society, and it's everyone. I mean, most people are pretty well aware of that. We're in that deficit state because we're constantly indulging. So we have, you have the overactive mind, overstimulated, poor regulation, which then leads to impulsive decisions, which leads to imbalances. Then you're in that deficit state, and you're basically, you're using all the reserves, which leads to the chase of more and more and more and more and more. So equanimity is like a very interesting topic. I first started hearing about it about 6 months ago. I went on a silent meditation retreat, and I kept hearing it being talked about, and to me it was instantly like, I understood it, but I didn't actually really understand it, because equanimity, when I would hear it, it was making me feel like it was, numbing things out, getting in this neutral state. However, it's really not that. It's what it is you're becoming, just like, you listen to your thoughts and you're becoming the observer. Basically, you're going through life in a balanced and regulated state. And so, an untrained mind is basically, you're reacting to the sensations around you. Something pleasant happens, you jump to it and you crave more and more and more. Or something bad happens, and the bad thing happens, you push away, and you aversion. You push away, you don't want, you hate, you don't like. And it's this constant of clinging, of going back and forth. And it keeps the mind agitated and ultimately, miserable at times. So it does sound a bit crazy, like you're numbing things out, but basically you're just allowing yourself to witness these urges and these things happening without the immediate reaction. A lot of times the breath can be used to alleviate that, and not jumping straight to that. But basically it's not clinging to the highs and lows. You're experiencing what is fully happening right in front of you, and you're basically, in a way, it's similar to detachment. So like how basically, I heard the definition of this, and it makes, when it was explained, it made a lot of sense to me a few years ago. Basically, detaching is basically not that you own nothing, it's that nothing owns you. So you are the conscious person, the master of these things, and you are consciously deciding, I want to do this, not I need to do this. I feel like that urge comes, and you're able to push it to the side. If you want to indulge in the sugary coffee drink, or you want to do this sort of dopamine just draining thing, you can consciously do it. But when it's becoming an unconscious thing, and you're just doing it and doing it and doing it, and you're not even aware of it, or you just don't have the regulation or the control, that's when it becomes a problem. So yeah, I think that the dopamine loop and working at that is like a precursor to getting through that barrier, to achieve more equanimity within your life. So yeah, I think that noticing these dopamine loops, whether it's social media, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, food, doing all these things unconsciously. When you're doing them unconsciously, you are more likely to fall into those patterns. However, when you remove yourself, one of the most important things I've found is that removing myself completely from those things, obsessive, eating, obsessive with social media, with phone usage, whether it's sexual urges, whether it's, there's endless list of these things. It can be something as simple as obsessive going to the gym, or you feel like you have to go, you have to maintain this body image, and it's this loop of just like it's never enough. You know, the jack dude in the gym who just keeps needing to go and go and go and go just to feel better. And it's coming from a different place. And so basically, you know, ultimately, to be you wanting to be the decider and not running off impulses. Instead, you're the conscious one, choosing to do these things.